It was a bright afternoon in the heart of the city, the kind of day where life bustled at every corner. Inside a luxurious boutique, the ambiance was calm yet opulent. Rows of designer clothing gleamed under soft golden lighting. The faint hum of classical music added to the air of sophistication. Standing in the middle of it all was Amara Lewis, a strikingly beautiful black woman in her early 30s. Her every move exuded confidence and grace. Dressed in a tailored silk jumpsuit, her diamond-studded bracelet caught the light as she carefully examined an item on display. She wasn't just any shopper. She was the picture of poise and independence, a self-made entrepreneur who had carved her own path to success long before marrying her husband, the billionaire tech mogul Ethan Lewis. Amara had earned her place in the world, and despite her husband's towering influence, she preferred to keep her identity grounded, avoiding the spotlight unless necessary. Today was meant to be a quick stop at the boutique to pick up a gift for her husband, a small token of love and gratitude for their anniversary. But as she moved toward the cashier, she noticed a subtle shift in the room's energy. A whisper here, a glance there. Staff members exchanged wary looks. It wasn't long before a uniformed police officer entered the store, his expression stern. Without introduction or explanation, he walked directly toward Amara. The tension in the air was almost palpable now. Amara stood her ground, calm but curious, as the officer's voice cut through the boutique's serene ambiance. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside," he demanded. And just like that, the ordinary afternoon began to unravel into a moment that would change everything. Amara strolled through the boutique with effortless elegance, her heels clicking softly against the polished marble floor. She stopped briefly to admire a display of watches, her discerning eye scanning the intricate details of each design. A faint smile played on her lips as she selected one, envisioning how perfect it would look on Ethan's wrist. Meanwhile, across the room, a store employee whispered to a colleague. The two exchanged nervous glances, their eyes darting toward Amara. To them, her confidence wasn't reassuring. It was threatening. One of them reached for a phone and muttered, "I'll call security. She's been here too long." Minutes later, a police officer arrived, his heavy boots echoing ominously as he entered. The murmurs in the store fell silent, replaced by a thick tension that seemed to envelop the room. The officer, a stocky man with a sharp jawline and an air of authority, scanned the room and locked eyes on Amara. She didn't notice him at first, engrossed in finalizing her purchase. But the sharp, commanding tone of his voice made her pause. "Ma'am," he said loudly, striding toward her, "I need you to step away from the counter." Amara turned to face him, her expression composed but puzzled. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked politely. "We received a report about some suspicious activity," he said curtly, his gaze narrowing. "Mind telling me what you're doing here?" Amara's brow furrowed slightly. "I'm shopping. Is that a problem?" The officer's tone grew sharper. "You've been moving around the store for quite some time. Can you prove you're not here to steal?" The words stung, but Amara refused to let her composure crack. "I'm in the middle of purchasing this watch," she said, gesturing to the item in her hand. "Feel free to confirm with the cashier." But the officer wasn't interested in her explanation. He stepped closer, his voice growing louder. "Don't get smart with me. I'm asking the questions here." By now, other shoppers had taken notice. A small crowd began to form, some pulling out their phones to record the scene. Amara could feel the weight of their stares. But she stood tall, her voice unwavering. "I'm answering your questions, officer, but I'd appreciate it if you treated me with the same respect I'm showing you." The officer's face flushed with frustration. "Respect?" he snapped. "You want respect? Then stop acting like you're above the law." Amara's calm demeanor only seemed to aggravate him further. The crowd murmured, a few voices growing louder, but no one dared intervene. The officer's irritation boiled over as he took another step forward. "I told you to step aside," he barked, reaching for her arm. Amara instinctively pulled back, a sharp intake of breath escaping her lips. "There's no need for that," she said firmly, but the officer's patience had run out. In one swift motion, he shoved her back, his hand pushing against her shoulder. The crowd gasped, the sound echoing through the boutique. Amara stumbled slightly but caught herself, her heels clicking as she regained her balance. For a moment there was silence, heavy, suffocating silence. The officer's chest heaved, his face twisted with anger. Amara, however, didn't flinch. She straightened herself, adjusted her outfit, and looked him directly in the eye. Her voice was calm, measured, but it carried a weight that made the room hold its breath. "You'll regret this," she said, her tone laced with quiet authority. The officer blinked, momentarily thrown off by her composure. The crowd murmured louder now, their phones capturing every second. A man in the back muttered, "She didn't do anything. Why is he treating her like this?" The officer, sensing the shift in the room, took a step back, but the damage was done. Amara didn't say another word. She turned to the cashier, who stood frozen in shock. "I'll be completing my purchase now," she said, her voice steady. The cashier hesitated, glancing nervously at the officer, but eventually nodded and processed the transaction. Amara placed the watch in her bag, then walked toward the exit, her head held high. The officer stood rooted in place, his face a mix of anger and uncertainty, as the crowd parted to let her pass. The incident wasn't over, but for now, Amara had made her statement without uttering another word. Little did the officer know the real consequences were only just beginning. In the sleek, glass-walled boardroom of Lewis Technologies, the air was electric. High-level executives sat around a polished oak table, their eyes glued to a series of financial projections on a massive screen. At the head of the table sat Ethan Lewis, the billionaire CEO whose sharp intellect and calm authority commanded the room. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, his presence alone was enough to keep everyone focused. The meeting was pivotal, discussing the launch of their next-generation AI product, a project set to revolutionize the tech industry. Ethan leaned forward, his piercing gaze scanning the data presented by one of his senior managers. He was deeply engrossed, as he always was when making decisions that could shape his company's future. But as the manager continued speaking, Ethan's phone vibrated softly against the table. Normally, he wouldn't have checked it during a meeting of this magnitude. Yet something told him this wasn't an ordinary notification. Glancing down, he saw a text from his wife's personal assistant. The message read, "You need to see this. It's about Amara." Attached was a video. Ethan's brow furrowed as he tapped on it. The screen filled with the shaky footage of a boutique. At first, it was difficult to discern what was happening, but then he saw her, Amara, his wife, his partner, his anchor. She was standing tall, her elegance unmistakable, as a police officer loomed over her, barking orders. His breath hitched when he saw the officer shove her. The force of it, though brief, was enough to make his jaw tighten. The murmurs of the crowd in the video were drowned out by a rising roar in Ethan's ears. He watched as Amara straightened herself, unshaken, delivering those final chilling words, "You'll regret this." The video ended, but Ethan's mind was reeling. A pin could have dropped in the boardroom and it would have echoed like a thunderclap. His entire demeanor shifted. The composed, strategic leader now exuded a quiet but unmistakable fury. The executives exchanged nervous glances, sensing the sudden change in their CEO. One of them hesitantly asked, "Is everything all right, Mr. Lewis?" Ethan didn't respond immediately. He placed his phone on the table, the screen still displaying the video thumbnail, and took a deep breath. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured but firm. "This meeting is over. A wave of confusion rippled through the room. "Sir," another executive ventured, "we still have key items to—" Ethan raised a hand, silencing him. "I said it's over. This is more important." Without another word, he stood, buttoning his suit jacket as he left the room. His assistant, who had been stationed just outside, hurried to keep up with his long strides. "What's the matter?" she asked, concern etched across her face. Ethan didn't slow down. "Get the legal team on a call. Now I want the head of PR and my chief of security looped in as well. We're addressing this immediately." "Understood," she said, scrambling to keep pace. "Should I push back your other meetings?" "Clear my entire schedule," Ethan ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And reach out to Amara. I want to know she's okay." The assistant nodded and picked up her phone to make the calls, but Ethan's focus was already elsewhere. As he stepped into his private office, he replayed the video, his jaw tightening with each passing second. He didn't just see an officer pushing his wife. He saw a blatant abuse of power, an affront to her dignity, and an insult to everything they both stood for. Within minutes, his office transformed into a command center. His top lawyers joined a conference call, reviewing the footage and outlining the legal avenues available. "This is clear-cut misconduct," one of them said. "We can press charges against the officer and sue the store for enabling this behavior." Ethan nodded but added, "This isn't just about the legal case. This is about making a statement. I want this to go viral. We're not just fighting for Amara, we're fighting for every person who's been treated this way." His PR team was already drafting a public statement, while his social media managers prepared to amplify the story. Ethan himself took a moment to craft a personal message. He knew his words carried weight, and this moment demanded nothing less than precision and power. Finally, his assistant returned with an update. "Amara's fine," she said softly. "She's on her way home." Ethan's shoulders relaxed slightly, but the fire in his eyes remained. "Good. Make sure she knows we're handling this." As the flurry of activity continued around him, Ethan took a deep breath, centering himself. He knew this wasn't just a reaction. It was the start of something bigger. And for Ethan Lewis, failure was never an option. Ethan Lewis wasn't a man who acted impulsively. His success was built on meticulous planning and precision. But this time was different. The video of his wife's mistreatment wasn't just a personal affront. It was a stark reminder of the systemic injustice he had witnessed and fought against for years. Now it was time to act. Sitting at the head of his office's conference table, Ethan's focus was razor-sharp. His core team, lawyers, PR specialists, and strategists, sat in silence as he set the tone. "This isn't just about Amara," he began, his voice calm but commanding. "This is about sending a message to anyone who thinks they can treat people like this and get away with it." Ethan turned to his head of legal counsel, a no-nonsense attorney named Laura Banks, renowned for her expertise in civil rights cases. He slid his phone across the table, the video of the incident queued up. "I want every legal option on the table," he said. "File a lawsuit against that officer for misconduct and against the store for enabling discrimination." Laura nodded, already taking notes. "We'll pursue civil damages for discrimination, emotional distress, and harassment. This video alone is enough to build a strong case." "Make sure it's airtight," Ethan added. "And I want the officer held accountable at the department level. File a formal complaint with Internal Affairs." Laura smirked. "Consider it done." Ethan then turned to his PR chief, Daniel Hayes, a seasoned professional who knew how to control narratives. "This video is going viral as we speak," Daniel said, scrolling through his tablet. "We need to get ahead of it." "Good," Ethan replied. "Draft a statement condemning the officer's actions and calling out the store for their complicity. Emphasize that this isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a larger problem." Daniel nodded. "Do you want to address it yourself?" Ethan leaned back, considering the weight of his words. "Yes, but not just a written statement. I want a video message, something personal. Let people see my face, Hear my voice." Within an hour, Ethan was sitting in front of a camera, his expression serious but composed. "What happened to my wife today is unacceptable," he began, his voice steady. "It's a reminder that no matter how far we've come, we still have so far to go in fighting discrimination and abuse of power. I won't let this incident pass quietly. My wife and I will be pursuing justice, not just for us, but for everyone who's ever been treated unfairly. Change starts now." The video was uploaded across all platforms, and within minutes, it began to gain traction. News outlets picked it up, and hashtags like #Justice for Amara and #Stand with Amara began trending worldwide. Ethan's next call was to Maya Johnson, a prominent civil rights activist and one of his longtime collaborators. "You've seen the video?" Ethan asked without preamble. "I have," Maya said, her voice tight with anger. "It's disgusting." "I need your help," Ethan said. "This is bigger than just us. We need to turn this moment into a movement." Maya was already making notes. "We'll organize rallies, start petitions, and push for legislative action. This can be the spark that forces police departments to reevaluate their training and accountability." "I'll back it financially," Ethan assured her. "Whatever resources you need, they're yours." By the end of the day, a coalition of activists and organizations had mobilized, using the incident as a rallying cry for justice. News of the protests and advocacy efforts began spreading like wildfire. On social media, the support for Amara and Ethan was overwhelming. Influencers, celebrities, and everyday users shared the video, expressing their outrage and solidarity. Memes, quotes from Ethan's video message, and calls to action flooded timelines. The couple's strength and determination inspired millions. Amara herself posted a simple but powerful message on her account. "I am more than this moment, but I will use it to demand change." Her words resonated deeply, garnering millions of likes and comments within hours. The store, overwhelmed by the backlash, issued a public apology. The statement read, "We are deeply sorry for the incident that occurred in our store. We are committed to ensuring this never happens again and will implement immediate training on anti-bias and diversity." But for Ethan and Amara, an apology wasn't enough. "Words without action mean nothing," Ethan said during an interview. "We'll accept their apology when we see real change." The police department, under mounting pressure, suspended the officer involved and launched an investigation. Protesters gathered outside their headquarters, demanding accountability and reform. By the end of the week, the incident had become a national conversation about systemic injustice, privilege, and accountability. Ethan's swift actions, combined with Amara's grace under pressure, turned their personal ordeal into a catalyst for widespread awareness and advocacy. As Ethan sat in his office late that night, watching the growing momentum, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just about reacting to injustice, it was about rewriting the rules, one step at a time, and he wasn't stopping until real change was made. The fallout from the incident at the boutique was swift and unrelenting. The video of the officer shoving Amara Lewis had gone viral within hours, and with each passing moment, the outrage grew louder. Social media platforms were flooded with posts condemning the officer's actions, and hashtags like #Justice for Amara, #End Racial Bias, and #Accountability now dominated the trending lists. The police department that employed the officer quickly became the focus of public ire. Protesters gathered outside the station, carrying signs that read, "Justice for Amara" and "No more abuse of power." Chants echoed through the air, "Protect, not persecute." Local news crews captured the growing unrest as community leaders stepped forward to speak. "This isn't just about one officer," said a prominent activist at the protest. "This is about a system that allows this kind of behavior to go unchecked. We're demanding accountability, not just for him, but for every officer who thinks they can act with impunity. Under mounting pressure, the police department issued a statement acknowledging the incident. The statement read, "We are aware of the disturbing video involving one of our officers. We take these allegations seriously and have launched an internal investigation. The officer has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome." But the statement did little to quell the anger. Critics called it a weak response. "Administrative leave?" One social media post read, "He shoved an innocent woman. That's assault, not a procedural issue." As the video circulated, internet sleuths identified the officer involved. His name, photo, and professional record were shared widely. It didn't take long for more troubling details to emerge. Reports of past complaints against him surfaced, incidents of excessive force and unprofessional conduct that had been quietly dismissed by the department. The revelation added fuel to the fire. Calls for his termination grew louder, with many demanding that he face criminal charges for assault. "This is what happens when bad behavior is swept under the rug," said one commentator on a national news broadcast. "It emboldens officers to act without fear of consequences." Meanwhile, the boutique itself was also facing the heat. The store's management had remained silent in the immediate aftermath. But as the protests grew, they had no choice but to address the situation. Their apology, posted on social media, read, "We deeply regret the incident that occurred in our store and the role we played in escalating the situation. We are committed to ensuring this never happens again and will be implementing mandatory anti-bias training for all employees effective immediately. We apologize to Mrs. Lewis and anyone else who has experienced discrimination in our establishment." But for many, the apology was too little, too late. Videos of the store staff's behavior during the incident were analyzed and criticized online. Viewers noted the store employees' suspicious call to the police, which many saw as the root of the problem. Protesters gathered outside the boutique, their voices as loud as those at the police station. Signs like "Shut it down" and "Boycott discrimination" filled the streets, while customers took to social media to pledge never to shop there again. The protests outside the boutique swelled as community organizations joined forces with activists. Local leaders used the moment to shine a light on broader issues of racial profiling in retail spaces, a phenomenon known as shopping while black. Amara's strength and Ethan's swift response had inspired a groundswell of support. A young protester told a reporter, "If this can happen to someone like Amara Lewis, a woman of grace, wealth, and power, imagine what happens to people who don't have a platform. We're here to say enough is enough." The crowd outside the store grew so large that it disrupted traffic, forcing the boutique to close temporarily. The once bustling establishment, known for catering to an elite clientele, now sat dark and shuttered as its reputation crumbled under the weight of public outrage. The backlash reached the national stage, with major news outlets running segments on the incident. Panel discussions debated the systemic issues at play, from racial profiling to police misconduct. The video of Amara's calm yet powerful response to the officer became a symbol of resilience and dignity. A prominent journalist remarked during a live broadcast, "This story has struck a chord because it encapsulates so many issues: racial bias, abuse of power, and the courage to stand against it." Amara Lewis didn't just walk away. She walked tall, and now the whole country is watching. Facing plummeting sales and a tarnished image, the boutique's management announced additional steps: hiring a diversity officer, donating to civil rights organizations, and hosting forums on racial justice. Still, many questioned their sincerity, calling the efforts damage control rather than genuine reform. The officer, meanwhile, faced an uncertain future. The investigation into his behavior intensified as the public demanded justice. Legal experts debated the likelihood of criminal charges, with many pointing out that the video provided clear evidence of excessive force. By the end of the week, The boutique and the police department had become cautionary tales of what happens when institutions fail to act responsibly. The backlash wasn't just a moment of outrage, it was a movement for accountability. For Amara and Ethan, the response was bittersweet. They hadn't sought this attention, but they knew it was necessary. "If this incident can lead to real change," Amara told a reporter, "then it wasn't for nothing." The stage was set for the next chapter, the fight for lasting reform. The anticipation outside the grand auditorium was electric. Reporters jostled for position, camera crews adjusted their equipment, and microphones stood ready to capture every word. The press conference, called by Ethan Lewis, was set to address the incident that had gripped the nation. Inside, the room was packed with journalists, activists, and community leaders, all eager to hear from the billionaire and his wife, Amara. The stage was modest. 2 chairs and a podium flanked by the logos of organizations known for their work in civil rights and social justice. Ethan and Amara walked in together, hand in hand. The room fell silent, all eyes on the couple. Amara's poise was as radiant as ever, her strength evident in the calm determination on her face. Ethan, dressed in a sharp gray suit, exuded the quiet confidence of a man on a mission. Ethan stepped to the podium first, glancing briefly at Amara before addressing the audience. His voice, steady and deliberate, carried the weight of someone who understood the gravity of the moment. "Good afternoon," he began, his deep voice resonating through the room. "As many of you know, my wife, Amara, was the victim of an appalling incident just days ago. The video of her being mistreated by a police officer has been seen by millions, but what you saw was only part of the story." He paused, his hands gripping the edges of the podium. "That video is not just about what happened to my wife. It's about what happens to countless individuals every day. People who don't have cameras to capture their pain. People who don't have the means to fight back. People whose voices are silenced before they're even heard." Ethan's voice grew firmer, his passion breaking through. Amara stood tall in the face of injustice as she always does. But this isn't just about her strength. This is about a system that allows people in positions of power to abuse that power without consequence. He gestured toward the cameras, his piercing gaze directed at the millions watching at home. It's about the racial profiling that led to her being targeted in the first place. It's about the officer who felt emboldened to shove her simply because he could. And it's about the institutions that have normalized this behavior for far too long. The room was silent, the gravity of his words hanging in the air. Taking a deep breath, Ethan's tone softened, but his resolve remained unshaken. "Amara and I have always believed that change is possible, but it requires action. That's why we are pledging $50 million to organizations working tirelessly for racial justice and police reform." A murmur rippled through the room, cameras flashing as journalists scribbled notes. "This isn't charity," Ethan clarified. "It's an investment in the future, a future where no one has to experience what my wife endured, a future where accountability is the norm, not the exception." He listed several organizations that would receive funding, from grassroots advocacy groups to national civil rights organizations. Each had a proven track record of fighting systemic injustice and implementing meaningful reforms. "This isn't just about money," Ethan continued. "This is about creating momentum. We're not stopping at donations. We're working with legislators, community leaders, and activists to push for policies that ensure accountability, both in law enforcement and in society as a whole." He leaned forward slightly, his voice filled with conviction. "This isn't just about my wife. It's about every person who has faced this kind of injustice. It's about the mother afraid to send her child out into the world. It's about the man pulled over for no reason other than the color of his skin. It's about all of us." Ethan stepped aside, allowing Amara to take the podium. She smiled faintly, her calm demeanor captivating the room. "What happened to me was humiliating," she began, "but I refused to let it define me. Instead, I choose to use this moment to shine a light on a problem we can no longer ignore. Her words were measured but powerful. I am just one person, but together we can be a movement. Together we can demand the change we want to see. The audience erupted into applause as she stepped back beside Ethan. Ethan concluded the press conference with a final thought. This isn't the end. It's the beginning. To those watching, I ask you to stand with us. Speak out. Demand better. Together we can build a world where dignity and justice are not privileges but rights. The room rose to its feet, applause filling the air as Ethan and Amara left the stage, hand in hand. Their message had resonated, sparking conversations across the nation. Social media erupted once again, this time with messages of hope and determination. Their stand wasn't just a reaction to an incident, it was a call to action, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, change is always possible. The press conference had done more than just address the incident, it had ignited a movement. Ethan and Amara Lewis's words reverberated far beyond the walls of the auditorium, sparking a ripple effect that began to reshape the national conversation around racial injustice and accountability. As the video of Amara's encounter continued to circulate, it became a rallying point for others to share their own experiences of discrimination and mistreatment. Social media became a hub for stories that had long been suppressed, with hashtags like #MyStory2 trending alongside #Justice for Amara. One viral post came from a young black man who recounted being stopped and frisked outside a convenience store for matching a description. Another was from a Latina mother who was followed around a high-end store by staff who assumed she couldn't afford to shop there. Each story added weight to the growing momentum, creating a tapestry of lived experiences that could no longer be ignored. Amara herself took time to interact with many of these posts, responding with messages of support and encouragement. In one particularly poignant reply, she wrote, "Your story matters. Your voice matters. Keep speaking up, and we'll keep fighting together." These individual accounts began to attract the attention of news outlets, which dedicated entire segments to exploring systemic discrimination in retail spaces and law enforcement. The once fragmented voices of victims were now amplified as part of a collective demand for change. The overwhelming public outcry reached the ears of policymakers, forcing local governments to address the issues head-on. In the city where the incident occurred, the mayor announced a sweeping review of police practices, starting with a focus on bias training and de-escalation techniques. "We've seen firsthand what happens when power goes unchecked," the mayor said during a press conference. "We owe it to our citizens to ensure that justice and accountability are not just words, but actions." Several cities across the country followed suit, implementing mandatory bias training for law enforcement and introducing independent oversight committees to investigate cases of misconduct. Some jurisdictions even began testing pilot programs to redirect nonviolent calls, like those involving retail disputes or mental health crises, to trained social workers instead of police officers. Ethan and Amara were invited to testify before a congressional committee on police reform. Their testimony was both personal and policy-driven, highlighting the need for systemic change while proposing actionable steps for accountability. Their recommendations included better data collection on police encounters, stricter consequences for misconduct, and incentives for law enforcement agencies to build trust within their communities. The boutique where the incident occurred faced a harsh reality. It couldn't return to business as usual. After weeks of protests and plummeting sales, the store's management realized that a mere apology wouldn't suffice. They reached out to Amara directly, requesting her guidance on how to rebuild trust. Amara agreed to meet with them, but on her terms. She brought along representatives from several civil rights organizations to ensure the conversation wasn't just about repairing the store's image, but about creating meaningful change. Together, They developed a plan to transform the boutique into a model of inclusivity. This included mandatory anti-bias training. Every employee, from entry-level staff to senior management, was required to undergo extensive training to recognize and address unconscious bias. Diversity hiring goals. The store committed to increasing representation at all levels, ensuring their workforce reflected the community they served. Community partnerships. A portion of the store's profits would now be donated to organizations working to combat racial injustice, and the boutique agreed to host forums and events to promote dialogue on diversity and inclusion. To show their commitment, the store unveiled a new slogan, "Elegance for Everyone." While some remained skeptical of their intentions, many applauded the effort as a step in the right direction. The ripple effects didn't stop there. Large corporations began reassessing their own practices, wary of facing similar backlash. Several high-profile companies announced initiatives to combat racial profiling in their stores, pledging to create safer and more welcoming environments for all customers. The fashion industry also took notice, with designers and brands speaking out about the need for systemic change. Some launched campaigns celebrating diversity, while others partnered with advocacy groups to ensure their messaging was more than just performative. Ethan and Amara's actions had sparked a chain reaction that extended far beyond their personal ordeal. Their fight for justice became a catalyst for a broader movement, inspiring people to demand better from their institutions and their leaders. In a televised interview months after the incident, Amara reflected on the journey. "This isn't just about me or Ethan," she said. "It's about every person who has ever been silenced, ignored, or mistreated. It's about proving that when we stand together, we can create a world where dignity and justice are the standard, not the exception." Ethan added, "Change doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with moments like this, moments where we refuse to accept the status quo and commit ourselves to building something better." As the movement gained traction, the couple received countless messages of gratitude from people who had been inspired to speak out, organize, or take action. Their story became a symbol of resilience, proof that even in the face of injustice, one voice, when amplified, can spark a revolution. The ripple effect had turned into a tidal wave, leaving no corner of society untouched. The journey was far from over, but it was a powerful reminder that change was not only possible, it was inevitable. The boutique looked the same as it had weeks ago. Sleek displays, warm lighting, and the faint scent of luxury perfumes wafting through the air. But this time, the atmosphere was different. The staff stood a little straighter, their eyes sharper with awareness and understanding. A buzz of anticipation filled the store as the automatic doors slid open, revealing Amara Lewis. She stepped inside with the same elegance and grace that had first caught the world's attention. Dressed in a simple yet stunning outfit, her presence commanded respect without demanding it. The murmurs began almost immediately, shoppers whispering as they recognized her, staff members discreetly pointing her out to each other. But this time, the store manager, a middle-aged man with a polished demeanor, hurried toward her. His nervous smile betrayed the weight of the moment. "Mrs. Lewis," he said, his voice carefully measured. "It's an honor to have you back. On behalf of the entire staff, I want to personally apologize for what happened here. I assure you we've made significant changes since then." Amara regarded him with a calm smile, her eyes steady. "Thank you for your apology," she said. "But I'm not here for an explanation or an apology. I'm here to see if the changes you've made are real." The manager gestured for her to follow him, eager to show her the steps they had taken. As they walked through the store, he pointed out new initiatives, a prominently displayed diversity pledge, posters advertising anti-bias training, and a section dedicated to highlighting designers from underrepresented communities. The staff greeted her warmly, their expressions sincere. One young employee, a woman with a nervous but genuine smile, approached her. "Mrs. Lewis," she said, "I just want to say thank you. What you did, it's changed everything here. We're better because of it." Amara nodded graciously, sensing the sincerity in her words. "I'm glad to hear that," she replied. "But remember, change isn't a destination. It's a journey. Keep going." As she continued through the store, a sense of poetic justice filled the air. She paused by the same display where she had been shopping when the incident occurred. The memory was sharp, but she refused to let it tarnish the moment. The manager hesitated behind her, watching her closely. "Mrs. Lewis," he ventured, "we'd like to offer you a gift as a small token of our appreciation and an acknowledgement of our mistakes. Please, choose anything you like." Amara turned to him, her expression warm but firm. "I don't need a gift," she said. "This isn't about me. It's about creating a space where everyone feels respected, no matter who they are." Her words carried a quiet power, resonating with everyone who heard them. The crowd that had subtly gathered around her nodded in silent agreement. As she approached the checkout counter, a shopper timidly stepped forward, her phone raised. "Mrs. Lewis," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but may I record this? People need to see this moment." Amara considered the request for a moment, then smiled. "Go ahead," she said. Turning to the camera, she addressed not just the woman, but the world. "This isn't about revenge. It's about making things right." Her tone was calm yet unwavering, her words carrying the weight of her journey. The video captured her paying for her purchase, thanking the staff, and walking out of the store with her head held high. It was a full-circle moment, not just for her, but for everyone who had followed her story. The video spread across social media like wildfire. Viewers marveled at Amara's dignity and strength, praising her for using her platform to inspire change rather than dwell on anger. Comments flooded in. "This is what true grace looks like. Amara Lewis is a queen. Her strength gives me hope for a better future. This isn't just about her. It's about all of us. Thank you, Amara, for standing tall." The video was picked up by news outlets who framed it as a story of resilience, progress, and the power of one person to spark meaningful change. It became a symbol of hope, proving that justice and accountability could coexist with grace and forgiveness. That evening, back at home, Amara sat with Ethan in their sunlit living room. The chaos of the past few weeks had settled, leaving them with a rare moment of quiet. Ethan handed her a glass of wine, his eyes full of admiration. "You didn't just change that store," he said, his voice soft. "You changed the conversation." Amara smiled, leaning back against the couch. "We both did," she replied. "And hopefully it's only the beginning." As they sat together, watching the sunset, Amara allowed herself a moment of peace. She knew the fight wasn't over, but for now she could take pride in knowing that she had turned a moment of pain into a catalyst for progress. The store's transformation became a case study for other businesses, while Amara's story continued to inspire people around the globe. Her words, "It's not about revenge, it's about making things right," were quoted in speeches, articles, and even printed on protest signs. Her grace under pressure had not just resolved an incident, it had planted seeds of change that would grow far beyond that boutique's walls, leaving a legacy of dignity, justice, and hope. The story of Amara and Ethan Lewis is not just about one moment of injustice, it's a reminder of the power we all hold to make a difference. What began as an ordinary day turned into an extraordinary movement, one fueled by courage, resilience, and the unwavering belief that change is possible. Amara's grace under pressure and Ethan's swift action demonstrated that standing up to injustice doesn't just mean fighting back, it means leading forward. They used their voices, their resources, and their influence to shine a light on issues too often ignored, inspiring millions to do the same. Their journey shows us that while power can be misused, it can also be a force for good when wielded with purpose and responsibility. But their story also raises an important question. What role will you play in creating a better world? Whether you're someone with a platform to amplify voices or someone whose daily actions shape the culture around you, the choice to stand against injustice is always within your grasp. We live in a time where silence is no longer an option. Every voice matters, every action counts, and every stand we take against discrimination and inequality brings us closer to a more just society. It's not enough to recognize what's wrong. We must also commit to making things right. As Amara said in her closing words, "It's not about revenge, it's about making things right." This message challenges us to reflect on our own lives. Are we using our power, no matter how big or small, to uplift others? Are we calling out injustice when we see it? Are we leaving the world better than we found it? The journey toward justice is long and often difficult, but it begins with moments like this. Moments where courage meets compassion, where voices rise together, and where hope turns into action. So, as you go about your day, ask yourself, what will you do to stand up for what's right? The answer to that question could change the world.